So last week we started the chapter that deals with obsessions, which is one of the most intriguing and aspects of our existence in our interaction with other individuals. We can be an obsessor. We can disrupt others just as much as we can be obsessed and be disrupted by others. Just to recap what we studied last week, an obsession has been defined by Kardec as a consistent and persistent influence of one spirit upon another, and just spirit upon another. These spirits may be incarnate or discarnate and vice versa. So it could be the obsessor may be in the spiritual world, the obsessor may be in the physical world, and the one being obsessed, the subject, may be in the spiritual world or in the physical world. Another thing to be careful here is that although an obsession always generates a negative effect, it's erroneous to believe the only evil, malevolous, ill-intended spirit can obsess upon another. We may be an obsessor, we may negatively influence another spirit to generate negative effects from our influence without the intention of doing so. Another thing to keep in mind is that this is a book of mediumship, it's the medium's book. So most of the discussion here is in relation to mediums, but the same applies to everyone with or without an ostensive mediumship. We are all mediums. If you were not mediums, you could not be obsessed by discarded spirits, because there'll be no interaction. But a more ostensive medium may be at a higher risk because it has a greater perception of the spiritual world. Okay, and since this is a book of mediums, Kardec is using the subject in relationship to mediums, but it's the same for everyone. Obvious, when I say mediums, I'm talking about ostensive mediums. Okay. And also, Kardec divided the obsession in three types: simple, fascination, and subjugation. We are about to complete fascination. We already completed simple, which a light obsession, so to say. These are mostly spirits who are there most for the fun of it, disrupting others as mediums or otherwise, more for the fun of it, because they have nothing better to do in their own lives, and they take pleasure of they have fun of disrupting people. Doesn't generate great consequences, does not disrupt much the life of the mediums. It could be very annoying, but it's not so really, does not generate very great consequences. Fascination is the second type. That's a completely different story. And it's a more tight relationship. It's one in which the spirits we usually target our pride, our vanity, and make us to truly believe in everything that those spirits are saying and follow those spirits' instructions, because we truly believe that they are absolutely right, and anyone who says otherwise is in the wrong. But this last paragraph I'm going to read now will give a good differentiation between the two types and will facilitate our understand before we start into subjugation. So it starts at one can easily be fully comprehend.
Okay. One can easily and fully comprehend the difference between simple obsession and fascination. One can also understand that the spirits who produce these two types must differ from each other in character. In the former, spirits who attach themselves to mediums only inconvenience them by their tenacity, from which the mediums try to break free. It is much different in the latter, for in order to achieve their purposes, such spirits must be skillful, cunning, and deeply hypocritical, since they can only succeed at being deceptive if they impose themselves by wearing a mask and putting on a false appearance of virtue. Grand words such as charity, humility, and love for God serve as their calling card, but through it all shine signs of how little evolved they are, which only those who are fascinated cannot perceive. That is why these spirits dread, more than anything else, persons who see things clearly. Their tactic is nearly always that of inspiring their mediums to avoid whoever might open their eyes. Thus, by avoiding any contradiction, they are always certain to be in the right.
Okay, thanks. So that's a very good summary and really explains the whole thing here between what is a simple obsession and a fascination. And I know it's perhaps prolonging the topic of fascination, but I find it extremely important that we understand this fascination because perhaps it's the most dangerous, the most difficult, although it's not the highest level of obsession, which we're going to see now in the has been subjugation. But you can see the differentiation. It's a huge gap between simple and fascination. It's a huge gap between what we can say a first degree to a second degree obsession. It's really light and day.
Mm.
Um, First of all, in the perhaps the biggest difference actually between fascination and simple and subjugation is that with the with the first and the third, with simple and its subjugation, the subject or the medium wants to get rid of it. With fascination, usually the medium or the ones being obsessed does not want to get free of it because he believes that he is in the right. He believes that that obsessor is in the right. He believes that contrary to what everybody else is saying, it's the right way to approach, and that obsessor is absolutely right. Perhaps the greatest differentiation, the greatest difficulty is exactly that with fascination generally, the subject, the one being obsessed, does not want to get rid of it. And again, as we expressed last time, those performance of fascination are much more eloquent than the simple obsessors. They are very well prepared for the task that they take. They will not come to a medium work in spiritism and tell them, oh, Christ was wrong, or the whole thing of charity is nonsense. We need to take care of ourselves. We need guarantee of because it's not going to work. They're going to use it. They're going to lead the subject. They're going to lead the medium on a different path. You say, oh, Christ is the greatest. I was with Christ when Christ was performing, when he was giving the Sermon of the Mountain. I was right there by his side. I heard everything and I comprehend everything. And I'm here to fix what's wrong with Christianity because I do know Christianity. and you have been chosen to be a part of this project, Spiritism is going to the wrong direction and we are going to fix it. It's completely different. It's going into pretty much in the same direction and create a deviation along the way, not suggesting a opposite direction. The deviation comes later on when the one being obsessed out of pride, out of vanity, allows the obsessor create a deviation in the ways of the way that that person thinks. And when that happens, it become extremely difficult to reverse that process, to bring that obsessed, that medium or non-medium, to return to the normal path. As I said in the beginning, and an obsession in order to be fixed in the work of this obsession, we want to work when both individuals are engaged in the process, the obsessed and the obsessor. Naturally, if one chooses to follow one path and the one doesn't, the one to choose the right path will likely be able to create a disconnection. Okay, and even if let's assume that I'm being obsessed by any spirit and I choose to return to the right path, and I put my effort and I do what I have to do it, I will be able to do so. In the process, hopefully, my obsessor will come along and will learn something. But if it doesn't, if it continues stubborn, it's very likely that we'll create a degree of separation in which, although he or she will persist, he or she will not be able to reach me and to have such control over me any longer. But it's usually will be a long process. And in case of the fascination, the first thing that's going to have to happen is that I would have to recognize that I need help, recognize that that path's not the best one, which is extremely difficult when dealing with fascination. Okay?
Okay. So
All right, so we start now with subjugation, unless somebody has a question. All right, let's go.
Subjugation, 240. Subjugation is a constriction that causes its victim's will to become paralyzed, making them act in spite of themselves. In other words, they find themselves under true bondage. Subjugation could be either mental or physical. In the former, those who are subjugated are led to make frequently absurd and compromising decisions, which under a kind of delusion they regard as sane. It is a type of fascination. In the
In the absence of a
in the latter, the spirit acts upon the physical organs to produce involuntary movements. In writing mediums, it produces an incessant need to write, even at inopportune times. We have seen subjugated mediums who, in the absence of a pen or pencil, pretended to write with their finger, and they could even be seen on the street, writing on doors and walls. Corporeal subjugation sometimes goes so far as to lead the medium to commit the most ridiculous acts. We knew of a man, neither young nor handsome, who was dominated by an obsession of this nature. He was coerced by an irresistible force to fall on his knees before a young woman in whom he had no interest and to ask her to marry him. At other times, he felt a strong pressure in his back and in the curves of his legs that, in spite of his resistance, caused him to kneel and kiss the earth in the public places in the midst of a crowd. He was regarded as crazy by those who knew him, but we are absolutely convinced that he was not, for he was fully conscious of the ridiculous things he did against his will. He suffered from it terribly.
Thanks. So subjugation is the highest degree of attachment between the two spirits. And in such a high degree that it may even have a physical effect. Let's got that places over here. And although this degree of attachment of the relationship between those two spirits and therefore the two petty spirits are so intense, it is easier to treat than fascination. And why is that? Because usually the one being obsessed is suffering tremendous and wants to get rid of it. There had been cases related to subjugation in which the subject would clearly say, I don't want to do it, but I'm forced to do it. There is a force. If it is someone who understands a little bit of spiritualism, may say he or she is forcing me to do it and I have no control of it. Those who doesn't understand anything about spirituality or spiritism say there is a force, there's something that is stronger, that is bigger than myself, that make me do things. Very often, the individual subjugation is aware that there is something very powerful somehow taking control of him or her. They feel that they are really the word Kardec uses in the bondage. And that force is extremely, extremely strong. And the subject, find it most of the time irresistible. It surrenders to the powers, it's almost like a hypnotic state for the subject to deal with it. So much so that it even may have a physical component to it. I wonder if you see in the book of the Medicine of Mediumship, that there is a person that is seeking for assistance in the Spiritist Center that is suffering from epileptic convulsions. And in the spiritual world, they can see that every time that those obsessors subjugating that poor man really attacks him, it disrupts his brain electrical activity, and he goes into epileptic, and he starts epileptic, he goes into seizures, convulsions right then and there. So strong it is, the influence of that obsessor upon that sort of obsessed individual. Kardec used the examples over here of someone make ridicule of himself, me in front of individuals. And of course, you're not going to reach conclusions, but we witness, people who are walking, who takes the subways, we see some kind of behaviors that kind of wonder if this is purely a mental illness, or if there is a degree of an obsessor making those individuals behave and do things the way they are doing over there. Or perhaps the subjugation is so persistent and constant that leads to a mental problem eventually, because there is indeed that physical component. But again, very often those individuals suffer tremendously and would like to get rid of it, as opposed to fascination. Comments?
Elmo.
Yeah. Hi.
So
I didn't hear you.
it's not clear to me if fascination subjugation also can be from incarnate to incarnate. or only in those two cases, discarnate to incarnate?
Yeah, I agree that subjugation between two incarnate would be pretty more unlikely to happen. Okay, so obsession as a role, yeah, they could be incarnate to incarnate, but at subjugation, it's more unlikely to happen.
But it can
Fascination,
happen,
we
right?
can obviously. Huh?
You can have a subjugation. Let's say a couple that the one has complete domination of the other, impose their will over the other, and the other doesn't take a step without asking the partner. This is subjugation.
Yeah, my question comes from
I think a
yeah,
question from the physical aspect, I think. Is that right?
like, you're talking to me or to João?
Yeah, to you.
No, the question comes from a podcast I heard today, revealing reporters investigated a website that is promoting suicide. Have you heard about that?
Oh, my goodness, no.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
I heard that it exists.
Wow.
I don't know the details, but I heard it exists.
Yeah, and it's from the United States. It's an American website, and there is a whole the discussion has several layers. But what I was thinking is that there are two leaders, two men, who organize the website and who opens up the social media platform, right, where they can go to. But it became a group thing. So people go there and get involved into this kind of, I was like, all I could see was not obsession, but maybe fascination or subjugation. Like people get so involved that many of them end up committing suicide, and they do their suicide live. Like, they're posting they're giving recipes for poisons, and it's insane. It's crazy. But the only thing I could see is that, is that coming from the spiritual world, like mean, evil spirits that are controlling all these people, or these two men physically here who are promoting that could be the one in charge of this kind of maybe fascination, subjugation, with all the things they talk about. They never show their faces, but they come and talk about, things promoting people to end their lives.
All of the above.
Yes, I'm very cynical with the idea that all the ideas, the good and bad, come from the spiritual world, as if we here, incarnate spirit, cannot come out with own ideas. Okay, but it's absolutely obvious that every time that I come out with idea, good or bad, I will surround myself with discarnate spirits and eventually incarnate spirits who have affinity with that kind of idea, with that kind of project, right? So I may come out with the idea of promoting suicidal mind. Okay, at the time that the idea comes to my mind that I created myself, or I was influenced by another spirit to create it. But if another spirit can create, so can I, because I also have a mind, right? So, but regardless, if the point of ignition came from myself or come from others, at the moment that I start thinking of it, developing a strategy for this, I will associate myself with spirits who think alike, who want the same kind of project. Now, it's very important that we differentiate an obsession from just an influence from the spirits. Advertisement. Advertisement is a means of influence us to buy what they want us to buy, to dress the way they want us to dress. Would you call that an obsession? Absolutely not, right? We are being bombarded by ideas from incarnate and discarnate. People want us to act and do things the way they want us to do. That is not an obsession. Obsession is a relationship, establish a relationship. Okay. Now, could those two individuals who start this project being obsessed by discarnate spirits? Yes, they could, but they could not. Could I engage and going into those podcasts and start to listen to those individuals and actually see, oh, they're right. Maybe I should commit suicide. My life really is not that great, and why should I be here? Will I call it an obsession? No. It's an advertisement. There's somebody advertising suicide, and I bought it. The same way that I choose to buy a Honda or a Mercedes-Benz or a Toyota because I was fooled by their advertisement. Now, the consequences are tremendously different, but it's also somebody advertising suicide, selling the idea that there's a good thing to be done. The same way somebody sells the idea that it's a good thing to drink Coca-Cola. Of course, the degrees of responsibility are exponentially big. It's not the same, but it is still, I could not call it an obsession. Could we develop an obsession from that point on? Yes. Could we establish a relationship that leads to an obsession? Yes, naturally. You understand the differentiation here? Would you say that all the Nazi soldiers are being obsessed by Hitler? No, they bought his idea.
In the case
They
of
were
this,
definitely influenced, but not obsessed.
yeah, I understand that you say that, you know, maybe the people could get attracted to that, as you say, we could be attracted to any advertisement, but this specific platform online provided like a community relationship. People knew each other. They were exchanging, so it became deeper than just, oh, this is a good idea, I'm going to do it. They were exchanging much more than that, like being manipulated by the leaders and by each other. So like those cults that we would see, you know, I think we had some examples in the 60s and the 70s, those leaders who would get together in a farm and it'd be a while together, and then suddenly everybody committed suicide at once. You know, this kind of a example that I'm giving. It's not just like going there, oh, it's appealing to me, I'm going to kill myself tomorrow. It's way deeper than that.
It is way deeper than that, but it's still not labeled an obsession the same way that you use the 9/11 case. I mean, these people really bought the idea of committing those things. I think that was the right thing to be done. And would you call that an obsession? I could not call it an obsession.
And call fanaticism.
Right, the same way that there are fanatics over there that who you follow, which I label as the false prophet, the pseudo Christians, and do the most ridiculous things in the name of Christ. Are they being obsessed? No, they become fanatic. They become, if nothing else, it'll go more of a self-obsession because they want to do this so badly that that they act in that manner. But I could not call it an obsession. It's not a really a direct relationship, so to say. Could it develop into it? Yes, it could. Again, I mean, those who who chose to follow Hitler, where they've been obsessed, but Hitler just bought the idea, or they think, because we already have the affinity with the subject, they engage in that behavior.
On the other hand, if you look at that famous case in the Guyana of Jim Jones and his followers, that they all committed suicide, the 400 something that committed suicide like 40 years ago, 30 years ago, that's fascination. For you to follow a leader first to a foreign country, to a community, and then from that community, when he asked everyone to commit suicide, you commit suicide. Of course, we cannot say that the 400 were fascinated, but the vast majority really were in the process of fascination by an incarnate to incarnate.
Yeah, and even in that example, the great majority was actually killed because they were forced to poison themselves. They didn't have a choice anymore. Men tried to escape, and they were forced to commit suicide. So it was not really
the ones that were fascinated killed themselves because they believed. The ones that tried to escape were the ones that were not fascinated. They were just enthusiastics or fanatics.
They were followers.
Followers,
yeah, true followers. Yeah.
But you see there, but it's always it's not black and white, right? Also, it's you have gray areas, right? Because you think of those that kill themselves on 9/11, causing all the destruction. Are you going to say that they are fanatics for sure? Were they in process of fascination, obsession? Probably. We don't know, but it's likely, right?
Fascinated, I agree, because they truly believe that they are doing the right thing, and despite what anyone could tell them. But not really subjugated. I would not go as far as
No, subjugated. No, I didn't say subjugated.
Yeah,
fascinated. Subjugation. I think it's much more. Daniela asked if we know case of subjugation, incarnate to incarnate, and I thought about these relationships. That one is completely subservient to another. That could be a case of subjugation, but again. It's a little bit more complicated than simply.
Yeah, but it could.
Yeah.
It could, because in reality, what really defines subjugation is when one individual loses its willpower to resist the influence of another one. So could it happen in an incarnate-incarnate relationship? Yes. But I think with all the distractions of the physicality, make it more difficult. Fascination is easy. Subjugation from a discarnate to incarnate is easy to understand. It's more likely. Incarnate to incarnate can happen, yes. Can I surrender my willpower, my decision make to someone that it's so strong around me that I cannot resist the impulses to make me act in one or another way? Yes, it could happen. Not as deep as, of course, physical, right? Physical requires that great approximation of the two paired spirits that is unlikely to happen with true incarnate.
So last week when we were talking, we were reading the obsession part, you gave the example of like social media, like, right? Like people being obsessed with other people, like following the whole day, the whole time, being obsessed with that person, with that thing. It was a comparison, or you indeed, you meant it? Like,
no, it's a comparison.
Call it, oh, okay.
It's
because I was like, wait a moment.
Yeah, no, it's a comparison. I'm using the comparison just like we have people following so-called influencers without even reasoning very much what they're doing, that's how obsession also works. It's just a comparison. Yeah,
Yeah,
I hope I clear that very well, because that is important to clear that. I'm not in any way implying that influencers, the people on online are our obsessors. No, it's a comparison. That's how it also works.
Elmo.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanna make sure that I understood. Because last week I kind of asked the same, almost the same thing, line of question that Danny was asking. But I was talking about, prejudice against, races and bias towards, gender, whatever. So, and you told me that fascination was a one-on-one relationship that sometimes, because the word, we don't have another word for that, and the obsession is used very loose in different ways. But in terms of spiritism, what we are studying on fascination and obsession and subjugation, I would assume as well, it's a one-on-one relationship. If somebody it's saying something, and like you Daniel was saying, and everybody wants to kill themselves, is not a subjugation or fascination or whatever. It's something else, because it's not a one-on-one. An individual can have different kind of a fascination or subjugation with different people, but is a one-on-one. It's not like one to the group or a group to the one. Does that still hold? Did I understand correctly?
Yeah, to remember the passage of Christ, and when the Spirit says, "Call me Legion, for we are many," right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there is this individual definitely being, so that was a case of subjugation, because the guy would run, roll on the floor and do all kinds of crazy things, and when Christ removed the spirit and spoke with the spirit said, "Call me Legion, for we are many." So that applies, and that applies the same case, let's say, in the matter of mediumship. I recall very well the case of this spirit, that person that was suffering from subjugation was more than one spirit. They saw more than one spirit over there, and they kind of take turns offending that person. That person have an established relationship with more than one spirit, but it is still a relationship. Is a one-to-one for him with A, is a one-to-one for him with B, is a one-to-one relationship from him with C. Okay? All of them have something against that person. And the example that I use, let's assume that past incarnation was a really mean, bad slave owner that create tremendous amount of cruelty to several individuals who are now in the spiritual world, and is still are unable to let go with all the pain that I suffered them, and decide that they are in the right to torture me. So each one of them have their own reason to come against me. Now, that guy, let's say that spirit A is a powerful spirit in the lower zone, and they may recruit 2 or 3 people to help him to gang against me. So my established relationship is with that spirit, but he brings 2 or 3 friends who have nothing better to do and to come to molest me. But I have an established relationship with that one. I have established relationship with another one that I caused the same kind of things, and that one also wants to come after me. And perhaps I had a son who did the same thing that I did to the same people, and now they are obsessing that one that was my son that was also being to the slaves, and they're gonna go after him as well. But that is again an established relationship of that one that was my son, and to those that were being enslaved and tortured by the one that is my son. So both of us have an established relationship. Both of us have um, responsibilities to repair the damage that we caused with one or with two or with three or with 100 spirits out there. But I have a direct relationship with each one of them, and each one of them have a direct relationship with me. It's different than someone, I buy the idea that someone is selling out there without having established a relationship with him or her. The influencers online right now, those crazy cult peoples right now, I buy the idea and I follow them. I cannot call that an obsession. And I want to make that very clear. Does it make sense now? Because this is important for us to understand.
Yeah, because but bringing back, for example, the slave owner, he carries the order for the whoever those guys to beat the crap of the slaves. So he might not even know how many slaves he has. Might not even know who they are. But he's the owner. So and somebody else who carried the order to beat or kill the slaves.
Yeah,
So
so each one of us
how's
are responsible at our degree. Who is more responsible? One who gives the order or the one who obeys the order? Who is more responsible, the general or the soldier?
the
Each one
general? But
carries each one carries the degree of responsibility, and each one needs to deal with the consequences of his or her act.
But how's that different? I still, I think I understand what Dan is going through, because I still don't see the difference from the influencer, because there's no direct relationship from the slave owner to their slaves, his slaves, from the influencer to the using the media
How can you tell there
to
is no direct relationship? He's the owner, and he's the one who sends the order for someone to do something. What more is needed to be established relationship there?
so that's the direct one because he's the owner.
Don't you think so? He owns, he makes the decisions. People are beating me up because somebody is ordering that to happen. What else do you need to be a direct relationship?
So in the case of the
Do you think he
influencer,
needs to go and be the one who does it himself? No, not necessarily. The general does not go shooting people in a war. He sends soldiers to do it.
so in the case of the influencer, the people have the choice to listen or not to listen,
Naturally,
right? So that
naturally.
so that does not make like a direct, because I have the option. In the case of the slave, they don't have that option because the slave master owns them, right?
Yes, yes, because if I decide to go online now and sell the idea that everybody should paint their hair purple and cut off the fingers, and someone in Arizona decides to follow my advice and do so, am I responsible for that? Yes, I'm responsible for that. What that person does. Is that an obsession? No, I'm responsible for what I'm doing, but you cannot call that an obsession. Someone was stupid enough to follow my stupid idea.
Yeah, I think I'm beginning to grasp it. Oh boy.
An obsession is a relationship. Established relationship. Could it develop in such from something else? Yes, it could. That relationship, I mean, my relationship with my wife may turn into an obsession in the future. Yeah, it could. Something that I'm starting right now. But that person in Arizona, that person in Shanghai chooses to follow the stupid things that I put online. It's not an obsession. I am responsible. I have a degree of responsibility to selling those stupid ideas. And that person is responsible for buying those stupid ideas.
Thank you.
Okay, continue.
Yep.
Okay, 241. Formerly, the dominion exerted by evil spirits was called possession. When their influence reached the point of producing an aberration of the human faculties. For us, possession would be synonymous with subjugation. However, we have not adopted the term possession for two reasons. First, it implies a belief in the existence of beings who were created for evil and forever turn to it, whereas in reality, they are only beings who are at different stages of imperfection and who are susceptible to improving themselves. Second, it also implies the idea of the body being taken over by a foreign spirit, a kind of cohabitation, whereas there is actually only coercion. The word subjugation expresses the idea perfectly. Thus, for us, there are no possessed individuals in the ordinary sense of the word, but only obsessed, fascinated, and subjugated ones.
This is also very, very, very important for us to understand and to use the proper nomenclature in accordance to Spiritism, again, in accordance to the books of the codification of Spiritism, that the word possession is erroneous for us to use in accordance to Spiritism, because that implies cohabitation of two spirits in one single physical body, which is not possible. I may surrender my willpower to another spirit so deeply that it manipulates my physical organs, but it's not taking over my body. It's almost as if, I agree with that, but it's not. Because that is very strong. It dedicates a whole paragraph 8 to say, do not mix things up. You want to clearly make the differentiation that three spirits cannot cohabit, so to say, because we know that spirit does not inhabit the body, but there is one body for one spirit and one spirit only. Okay, and and when we in Spiritism are going to express this topic of obsession, you have to use the proper nomenclature. There is no possession. Possession would be something different, so be something taken over the body. That does not happen. It gives the impression of, I would agree, but that does not happen. Okay, comments, questions? All right, move on.
241.
242.
242, I'm sorry. Causes of obsession. As we have said, obsession is one of the greatest obstacles of mediumship, and it is also one of the most frequent. Hence, every effort should be taken to combat it, especially since apart from the personal harm resulting from it, it comprises an absolute obstacle to the purity and the veracity of communications. Since obsession to any degree is always a result of coercion, and since such coercion could never be exerted by a good spirit, it follows that every communication given through an obsessed medium is of suspected origin and merits no confidence at all. If perchance something good may be found in it, it is necessary to keep it and reject everything else that displays the least reason for doubt.
Thanks. So it's a very important point that Kardec brings here, is that, as I have said, obsession is not limited to mediums. Anyone can, and perhaps most of us are, subject of obsessions. It happens more often than we imagine it happens. Kardec states that over here. Now, when you're dealing with obsession with an ostensive medium, it becomes more complicated and more difficult because, as Kardec says here, and I quote, since obsession to any degree is always the result of coercion, and since such coercion can never be exerted by a good spirit, it follows that every communication being through an obsessed medium is of suspected origin and merits no confidence at all. This is absolutely important. The topic of accept, reject, then truth before you accept one falsehood, one lie. No good spirit, no good person will force its opinion, will force its ideas upon someone else. We'll give it, you take it if you want, if you don't want to, it's up to you, right? We do it because we are ignorant. We do because we are still not good spirits. But good spirits do not force anything upon anyone, does not create any dogmas. Okay, when you start seeing creation of dogmas, you already got suspicious that it's not coming from a good spirit. Therefore, if you notice that a medium is in the process of obsession, being it of any kind, perhaps the safest thing to do is to not take those messages. There are exceptions, yes, and if we find those exceptions, if it's good, we keep it. Kardec make sure that he states that if perchance something good may be found in it, it is necessary to keep it. But have to be extremely careful. It's someone whose mediumship is somewhat compromised by this process. So ideally, that medium will undergo a treatment, a disobsession, to be able to return to work as a medium, to be able to return to provide reliable communications. I know that the question would be, how do we know it? It's hard, it's very difficult to make this diagnosis, so to say, of a medium being obsessed. We have to follow pattern. We have to really read carefully. And of course, here we talk primarily about psychographies, but it could be psychophony as well. Okay, we got to, and that is important, the importance of having some things. Now you have the ability to do so, to tape those voices and read over and over again and see what is going and follow pattern, as every week is the same thing, and a lot of words and no content. No, one must be do a very thorough investigation to conclude that a spirit, that a medium may or may not be being obsessed. And again, we need to be extremely careful to not create false accusations or false diagnoses and compromise the work of a serious medium as well. But with paying good attention, understanding the doctrine, this is where knowledge plays a big role. Observing carefully, observe patterns carefully, one may come to this diagnosis that indeed he or she is undergoing a process of obsession, and then that person needs to be treated for that problem. And there is absolutely no shame, not wrong. Again, I mean, it's more common than we think. Kardec put it in the very beginning. And it is also one of the most frequent. It happens very often. We need to be careful. And again, make sure that we are able to recognize, if we have to recognize, address it, try to take care of it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. 2:40.
Should I stop here, Amo? 2 minutes.
Oh, yeah, sure. Yeah, that is a good idea. Then we can go deep in the causes of obsession, which is quite interesting as well. Any question regard to this now? Okay, I'll make a final prayer.
Okay. As we come to the end of our meeting tonight, again with our hearts full of gratitude to our spiritual benefactors, our guardian angels, all who have contributed here in the understanding the chapter of obsession. May we take with us understanding and putting into practice all that surrounds us, allowing us to understand the differences. We ask as we leave here today to continue throughout the week with our studies, with our prayers, always keeping in our hearts all those that are going through much more difficulties. We ask for the protection of our families, of our loved ones, and all that are going through difficulties. May we continue throughout the week with our study groups and our meetings. With gratitude in our hearts, we thank you, dear Lord. And may you protect our teachers. A special prayer to Jusara Congo, who's now continuing her beautiful work throughout the land here. May you protect and guide her and bless her. We ask as we leave here today to continue with our prayers throughout the week. With gratitude and humbleness, dear Lord, we thank you for all. And with that in mind, we ask permission to close our meeting tonight. So be it.